All right, there you go, Chair, thank you. All set.
Mike, do you have a little tune you'd like to hum along at the beginning?
Maybe I can. Yes, sir. Thank you, Chair. I will do that. Everyone on the phone and attending via Zoom from the public is in listen-only mode. During public comment period, please enter your comment in the chat and it will be read into the record. Include your full name and the magisterial district in which you reside. If you don't know your magisterial district, please provide a general location of your home or business street address. We will run through the chat comments first and then take comments by phone. For those on the phone, please use *9, that's *9, to indicate you'd like to make a public comment. We will ask you to provide your full name and magisterial district or general location of your home or business, and then allow up to 3 minutes for your comment. Thank you, Chair.
Because of the continuation of the COVID-19 pandemic and the limitations on group gatherings imposed by the governor's executive orders, this meeting is being held by electronic communications means on the Zoom platform. It is authorized by the county's April 15th and June 17th continuity of government ordinances, this authority's resolution of April 22nd, and the Virginia statute signed into law on April 24th, permitting this authority to meet electronically to discuss and transact business necessary to continue its operations. The public has real-time audio-visual access to this meeting over Zoom and real-time audio access over telephone, both as provided in the lawfully posted meeting notice. The public is always invited to send questions, comments, and suggestions to the authority through the county's information technology. This meeting is being recorded and will be made available on the county's website. With that explanation, I ask the board members attending to identify themselves and their current location in general terms. And I'll go through the roll here. We'll mix up the order this time just to be fun. Let's start with Bill Fritz.
I'm at my home in Charlottesville.
Trevor Henry.
Present and in my home in Albemarle County.
Donna Price.
Present and at my home in the Scottsville Magisterial District.
Waldo Jaquith.
I'm at home in Stony Point.
Liz Palmer.
Here, and I am at home in Ivy.
And for myself, I am present. If you couldn't tell, then there's a problem with your receiving. And I'm at my home in Earlysville. So I think we are duly established and read in. Bill, I'll make sure you get a copy of that memorialized little sermon for your notes, if there's any need for the minutes. I think the second item on the agenda here is the approval of the agenda. I trust everyone has received a copy. Are there any changes to the agenda?
I move that we approve the agenda.
Thanks, Liz. I'll second that. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any nays? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. We should have all received a copy of the May 27th minutes from our illustrious secretary. I hope everyone's had a chance to review those. Any changes or corrections to the minutes?
Waldo had a change. One of these days I'm going to realize the difference between known and know, but I'll get it right one of these days.
Probably changes the whole meaning of that section, so.
Yeah, but then I'm gonna have to find a new mistake to make.
Thank you, and we'll look forward to catching that too.
Yeah.
I'd like to move to approve the minutes. Is there a second?
As amended, I guess.
Very good. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, then we'll take the minutes as approved. And that brings us to the public comment section of our meeting. Looks like we've got a couple of potential attendees from the public. Are there any comments? And I'll ask our Mike if you have unmuted their mics.
Yes, I've tried and it's not working. So maybe the chat.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, there we go. Okay, it just took a little while. David, you're unmuted.
Really no comment. I just saw the invite there to unmute. Just wanted to let you know, I guess my purpose for joining. I spoke at a meeting several months ago. Mike, I know we've had some conversations since. Just wanted to listen in and find out the latest goings on and see what's going on with the RFP and that sort of thing. Appreciate everything that ABBA has been doing to try to support our area. I guess doing everything in reverse here. I'm from the Taylor's Gap area in Albemarle County, so I believe that might be Ivy Magisterial, perhaps. So, we are one of the project areas listed in the RFP, so just hoping to get an update on that. Thank you.
Well, thanks for tuning
Thanks,
in.
David. Thank you very much. Yeah, that's the thing. You can unmute, and then the person who wants to talk has to accept the request to unmute. So I'm assuming that Allison has no comments this evening. So I think we're ready to proceed with only the 2 attendees. So thank you, Chair.
Okay, Allison, if we got that wrong, send us a message and we'll fix that. Moving on to our old business, item 5 on the agenda. 5A, the VADI 2019 update with the CVEC project. Mike?
Yes, sir. Just give me a second here and I will go forward. So thanks for the time this evening, Chair. I am glad to report that CVEC continues their work on the Virginia Telecommunication Initiative update for 2019. Remember, this project started over a year ago. Just to put some things into reference, CVEC Firefly is in all corners of the county, meaning they've got substations that both exist in Albemarle County and are in neighboring counties, including Louisa, Fluvanna, Nelson, and others, but essentially Buckingham. We have major work going on in both the Cassius Corner, which is coming from Louisa, Zions, which is coming from Fluvanna, Martin Store, coming from the west in Nelson, and of course the Midway substation, which is in Albemarle. Kid Store, which is in Fluvanna, has a small number of members in Albemarle. That substation is scheduled for activation in winter of 2020. In addition, there are 3 other substations that are scheduled for completion in 2022. So one of them is the Red Hill substation that's scheduled for fall of 2022, and the Whitehall and Schuyler substations are both scheduled in the winter of 2022. Just a reference point on both of those stations, they have a large number of CVEC members. So that's one of the things that we're working toward. Is there any way that we can accelerate any of these additional substations? I could give you some background on all of the other substations, but I think I'll just stay on Midway because that's the VADI or the VADI project. So Midway continues to be worked. The Firefly had a delay because of COVID, and that delay was submitted to DHCD. Thank you, Chair. And it was approved. So the delay is we have to submit all of our paperwork by July 15th, 2020. The crews have completed their fiber placement, splicing, and service drops in the Midway substation area. About 220 today out of the 375 pre-registered accounts have been connected. Final connections will continue through July. So we're in good shape there. It's just taken a little longer. So we're happily going forward with that, and people are starting. Not only have we have 220 already been connected, the rest of them are beginning to be connected. So that's my update for the CVEC Firefly project. Thank you.
Great.
Yep.
That take us on very nicely then to the VADI 2020 CenturyLink project status.
Okay, well, the first thing I would like to do is just introduce Derek Kelly. Derek Kelly's on the Zoom meeting with us. And Derek, if you want to say a few words and introduce yourself to the Broadband Authority, I think everyone's name is available to you, but if you just go ahead and let us know how things are going with you.
Sure.
Thanks.
Sure. Thanks, Mike. And hello, everyone. Derek Kelly with CenturyLink. I'm now have government affairs responsibilities for Virginia. Many of you, I'm sure, know Rich Schulman. He retired a couple months ago and is now actually working sort of a part-time job with the Virginia Telecom Industry Association. So he's not completely gone from the scene, but he is gone from CenturyLink, unfortunately. And now I'm the new face that you have to deal with, and starting to recognize some faces from multiple Zoom meetings. So I look forward to the day I can finally come up to Charlottesville and meet some of you in person. I think Mike's going to touch on the Green Creek call that we had last night, but it was a good call, and a little different doing it in a community meeting over a conference bridge, but I thought it went well and the questions were good. And overall, I think the call and the reception of the call was all positive. So.
Okay. Thanks, Derek. So just to bring everyone up to speed, we signed the contract. We talked about that at our last meeting, and made some progress by posting a frequently asked question file on our website, on the county website. The conference calls that Derek mentioned are in process of being scheduled. The first was the Green Creek Road conference call, which happened last evening, and we have 3 more to go. For Green Creek Road, we had 21 attendees on board, and they had many, many great questions. And I thought it was overall a successful intro. To have that many people interested and asking questions was a really good sign that we've got a lot of community support for what we're doing. So that was a very good meeting, I felt. Supervisor Palmer, you were an attendee. Do you have any questions or comments before I go on?
I have a question, and I guess a comment. How many, again, are eligible on Green Creek Road? How many people, how many homes? I've kind of lost track of that. I know it was in one of the.
So I think it's 155 for the entire Green Creek project. It's not just on that one road because there's a couple side streets and private roads, but that area is 155 homes.
Okay. And I guess one of the things that it sounds like most people are concerned about is how much are they going to have to pay for it. I always like to take a positive look at these things, but I guess I'm thinking 21 attendees is not that large of a proportion of 155. Mike, did you have emails going out to how many people?
I think the final list, Ken Klautz and I worked on that. The final list, we had 37 emails.
Oh, okay. Then that's pretty good. Yeah. Okay.
So.
Yeah, I think it went well, and Mike and Derek did a great job, and I think people seemed overall pretty happy about everything. They just want to know how much it's going to cost and when it's going to come in, and
yeah,
not a surprise. So,
and I guess that sort of rounds it up for now. And I think a valid question maybe for Derek and for everyone to answer is how can we as a community, as well as a broadband authority, and me as the chief administrative officer, what can we continue to do to help CenturyLink move this project forward? I think we'll learn more about that as we get going, but we're going to have 8 different types of these projects going on, all of them with different community attributes. So it's going to be a challenging time, but also a great time once the connections start happening. So I'm looking forward to that, getting to the end of the road on this one, which I think, Derek, you're probably in the same excitement level as me. Let's get this thing rolling and keep things rolling. If we have questions, we'll bring them to you. And if you have needs, you bring them to me, and I'll present them to the Broadband Authority for action. So that's how I feel about it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And just so the whole board has an idea, we've sort of the first phase was our planning phase. So network planners, that was sort of the pre-application time is when they do the majority of the work of just ballparking and not ballparking, but trying to come up with a pretty accurate price of what it would cost, where we would design everything. And then after the grant was announced, then they actually put those plans into all of our systems that sent them to our engineering team. So that's already been done. We then had our engineering team actually go in and they designed the system where they think the best spot for all of our equipment's going to be, where exactly all the fiber is going to be, and getting everything laid out in a sort of an engineering plat. So that was completed here, I think, in the last 2 weeks or so. So we're in the process right now of putting all the jobs. Mike said there's 8 areas for us in our networking system. We've broken it up into 15 sort of jobs that it's going to go out to our construction team. So we're in the process of seeking bids right now for the construction piece of it. Once we have those bids finalized and announce award who we're going to have do the construction, then I think we'll start to get a little bit better of a time frame of, which jobs are we going to do first. And as we get closer, it'll be a little bit easier to have, I think, a less vague of a FAQ and can hopefully get some more concrete information. But in the meantime, Mike's been a great resource with just helping funnel questions. There was a couple one-offs last night during the call about private roads, and I'm going to build a house here that's not there right now, and how do we get that? So appreciate Mike's willingness to sort of be that go-between between the community and us, and it's definitely helpful. I've participated in plenty of these grants in other states where the partnership with the county is not really there. It's more just between us and the state, where we're just going out and deploying stuff, and we don't have that sort of one-on-one touch that we had last night. So that was refreshing. So I just commend everyone for having the Broadband Authority and Mike's role set up, because it's a neat process, and I wish more counties would devote the resources to helping us with it.
Can I add one more thing that I thought was really important that one person asked, and Derek, you just referred to it, was that if you're on a private road and there's multiple houses on a private road, one of the questions was, of course, how far am I from the terminal if I'm down a private road? And it was explained to the participants, Derek explained to the participants, that it's a very good idea for people to reach out to CenturyLink, and I guess through Mike, to let them know that they're interested in service, because the more people down those private roads, the more likely they're going to have a terminal near them when they do the design. So it's important to get that information prior to the design of the system. Did I get that right?
Yes, yeah, exactly right. We've had 2 requests come in already, one late last night and then another early this morning. So the community has taken that to heart. They're starting to combine efforts and make sure we understand, this is how many people would like to be involved, and they're going about, talking to individual homeowners and people who are renting, and getting everyone on board. So yeah, it started a great process, I think. So thanks for that, Liz. Okay.
Mike, can we open it up to questions?
Sure. Yep. Questions on the CenturyLink project body 2020.
I have a question, Derek. In the process of doing the engineering work, did you guys uncover any gotchas or problems that you didn't foresee?
Not that I've heard of. I know, so when the engineering process was done, they went back with our original planners, which I think many of you know, Glenn Butler. So they actually walked through every street and every house through all 15 of the projects, and just were comparing them and, counting rooftops and where this is. And they said there was a couple places where the engineer said, well, why don't we add an extra terminal here? And then these homes would be closer to that. So a couple of those where we added some terminals to get a couple more homes closer to those. So I think that was the only sort of thing that came out that was different than the original plans.
It sounds like no major issues then. That's good.
Nope. And I think this isn't set in stone yet, but I know one of the private roads that was brought up last night, and I think there's like 5 or 6 homes back a private path. I think we're actually planning on placing fiber a good way back to that house, back down that path. That way it cuts down on the drop lengths for the individuals down there. So still waiting for verification on that. But when I was trying to compare the maps I've seen, I think we're actually have done that in a couple of the instances where there was more than just one house down a long driveway.
That's great to hear. Anybody else have a question for Derek?
I do. Derek, last night you explained to folks that a good rule of thumb for cost was $1.55 a foot for the fiber. I believe that's what the figure you gave, but it was very unclear to me as to if there was going to be a distance from the terminal through which they wouldn't have to pay for that connection. Is there a certain amount of feet? And then past that number of feet, they would have to pay per foot. I heard 650 feet at one point a while back, and I'm just not sure where we are with that.
Yeah, so up to about 650 feet is free. So, and I say about because, you know, honestly, if our technicians go out there and it's 670 feet, more likely than not, they're just going to put in the drop request and put it in there, because by the time we have to engage our engineers and have them work out, it ends up costing us more money than we would get back in the process. But for those drops that are 1,000 feet, 2,000 feet, 4,000 feet, I think someone said their driveway was maybe a half a mile long, or my driveway is like 50 feet long, if that, so it's hard for me to imagine. But I think then that's about where the average comes out to be is, if you have 1,000-foot driveway, you're probably going to end up spending somewhere around $1,500 to place that drop back there.
So it's not minus the 650, it's whatever it is, if it's over a certain amount.
Correct. And I think that's just the ballpark average, just to get some price in someone's mind of a ballpark of where it needs to be.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? All right. Well, thank you very much, Derek, for keeping us up to date on this project. It's an exciting opportunity.
It is, and hopefully by the time we actually get to placing some fiber, and maybe we can have a little ribbon cutting or some type of ceremony to just sort of launch the first area, and hopefully we can do that in person by then.
Go down there and find someone who's got an open Wi-Fi and connect onto their network.
There we go.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Next up on the agenda is item 5C, the VADI 2021 How to Apply webinar.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I attended the virtual webinar first time. I've been to, this will be my fourth, maybe the fifth. Nevertheless, I was there on virtually, and it was a great webinar, went very well. The DHCD program is extremely well run, and it goes to show that the Commonwealth can do some valid things if funding is provided. VADI is a perfect example of how to run a program like this, and the grant application process, the fact that they allow feedback, so they encourage people to provide feedback for the guidelines, which we did. Both the private and public sector all provided feedback, and they made changes. So the guidelines that we saw initially were changed. Some of the things that we put in as recommendations were accepted. So that was a real good sign that they're listening and taking action based on public and private input. So that was a benefit. It's definitely going to be a busy time identifying partner ISPs and posting our intent to apply by 7/13. So the big date there is nothing has changed. They're moving the program forward without changing any of their original dates. And the due date for applications is 8/17. So we're on target to accept offers. I mean, one of the benefits of the next item is that the RFP clearly indicated that if you're interested in applying with the Broadband Authority for VADI, then this is a perfect time to do it. In your response, indicate that you're interested in applying for partnering and applying for VADI 2021. So that's my update there, unless there's any questions. Any questions?
Going once, going twice, going thrice. Sold to Mike Culp.
Thank you. Thank you.
Moving on to the RFP then, our RFP.
Yes, the Broadband Authority, as you recall, through the spring decided we were going to post a request for proposal for broadband expansion. And we have funding set aside thanks to the Board of Supervisors appropriating funds to the Broadband Authority. We have funding available that will allow broadband expansion work to be completed by a partner ISP. So it's clear that the Broadband Authority is not building an internet or a network connection. They're also not interested in operating a network, so they won't be collecting fees from citizens. This is all about a partnership and providing funding that assists ISPs as they build out their broadband networks in Albemarle County. The first step in that, as you recall, was an RFI. We went through an RFI process and received feedback, RFI standing for Request for Information. So we did a unique option here where we asked for information about how to structure our request for proposals. So we had ISP input on the RFI, which was built into the eventual request for proposal. The RFP, working with our procurement office, particularly Sharon Cash, and I have to thank her graciously, and she did a wonderful job working with us to post the RFP. And one of the tenets of the RFP is what is called an optional pre-proposal conference, which we held virtually, and that was held last week. And we had 14 participants representing 9 private companies on the call. So it was a very well attended call, considering, having 9 different ISPs participating in the pre-bid was a very good sign. Everyone was reminded that proposals are due on June 30, and we posted our final 2 addendums today and day before yesterday. So we had a couple of addendums that came in to make sure all the questions that were asked during the pre-bid proposal conference were available to anyone who was interested in the proposal. So we feel pretty confident that we're going to get responses back. And at this point, it's a wait and see, and there's no more questions that can be asked. So we're just looking forward to June 30. The next big thing that'll happen after that is we'll put together a proposal review team, which is already done. The representatives are Waldo Jaquith, Mike Culp, myself, and a representative from the school division of Creo Wood. He's one of the technology folks on the school team, has offered to help us with scoring these proposals. If a valid proposal comes in that needs to be negotiated, we'll make that recommendation to the Broadband Authority. And I think the next step would be, authorization from the Board of Supervisors to proceed with negotiations. So it's sort of a 3 or 4 step process once we've gotten to the point where we've scored the proposals, but we'll keep everyone involved on how things are proceeding as we receive proposals during the next 2 weeks. 1 week, I should say. It's 6/24 already. Where did June go? So thank you for that moment to update people on the RFP. Questions? Can I take questions?
We should expect by the before the next meeting, well before the next meeting, that the working group doing the review will have some sort of report to the Broadband Authority before our next meeting, so we can act at that time if we see fit.
Correct. And we may need to call a special meeting. It depends on what comes back in the proposals. So agree with you.
Okay, well, I've canceled my cruise for the summer, so if we need to call a meeting, then we'll see if we can do that.
Canceled everyone else's too.
Yeah, well, I took that precaution.
I have a general observation, just a reminder that we had no idea what was going to happen in response to this RFP. An entirely acceptable outcome is nobody bids, or we look at the bids and we're like, this is crazy. We're not going to accept any of these. Like, that's okay. Like, we're trying a new thing here, and part of trying a new thing is accepting that it may not work correctly, or it might work pretty well, but we want to iterate and improve on it. But I hope others share my perspective anyway of tuning expectations here, that this is very different than what we normally do. This is weird for vendors. It's going to be weird for us. And that this should be a learning opportunity. We should not expect to just knock it out of the park the first time. We're doing something new here.
If you are not prepared to fail, then you are not truly trying new things.
Yeah. Yep.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. Assuming no one's talking while on mute, then we'll plow right ahead. Next item on the agenda is updated broadband strategy plan. And this is something near and dear to my heart, so I will seize the mic for a moment. The purpose of any strategy plan, in my mind, is to serve as a communication vehicle to your organization, a communication vehicle to your stakeholders, and a communication vehicle for the general public. And it should lay out essentially what you're about and how you think you're going to get there, and what you see as the end game. So really just answering the three questions of where are you, where do you want to go, how are you going to get there. Therefore, you don't expect a lot of fine detail in strategy plans, but you certainly want enough information so that general approaches and what anyone should expect to be happening is what they'll be able to see from your strategy plan. With some help from Mike, I took materials that we've approved over the years and put those together in a strategy plan format. I think we are now at the time where we need this communication vehicle, not only for ourselves, but for others. And I think it will be beneficial to us. With that said, the best strategy plan has inputs from all corners, and there haven't been a lot of other inputs into this at this time. So this is an open invitation for more input into where that strategy plan, what it says, where it's going, what questions it answers if that's necessary. And with that, I'll turn it over to anyone else who has comments or questions they'd like to raise.
I do. I have a few things. I mean, this is like a constitution for us, like here's what we believe in and here's what we're doing. So in the spirit of that, I'd like to ask a question and then propose a couple of non-trivial modifications. I have a bunch of trivial modifications I'll pass along just as a Word doc with some edits and stuff. The first is I'm curious about how we would define ABBA will not operate its own internet service provider facilities. And in particular, I'm thinking of my increasing personal belief that for broadband authorities to be successful in counties like Albemarle, it's important to lay middle mile fiber. I think I don't see any way that we cover all of Albemarle in our stated timeline here without Albemarle County, at a minimum, fomenting the creation of and perhaps actually using Albemarle-owned fiber, such as the school system already has in the ground, as a vehicle for ISPs, for last mile ISPs to be able to build on to get out into the rural areas. My question is, are we precluded from doing that by saying we will not operate our own internet service provider facilities if one thing we might do is lease out a strand of fiber or 2 or 10 strands of fiber on a 20-year lease? Does that make us an ISP? Or because we'd be renting to ISPs at that point, are we not an ISP? I have no sense of this.
Well, I think you pose a question that was not originally contemplated when
it was not
when the Broadband Authority was created, or perhaps it was. I'm sure Liz could speak to that. But I think the short answer from my perspective is there's no scenario where we want to compete with internet service providers. We are here to facilitate internet service providers. There's nothing inconsistent with the notion of middle mile fiber in that regard. On the other hand, operating a business, so, you know, leasing some asset that's already installed, that's one thing. Operating a business where we have employees who do things, that's a very different level of endeavor. And in any event, in both of those situations, even if we were simply leasing facilities, I'd want to go back to the Board of Supervisors to get their blessing and endorsement for that. I don't feel like that's what we have in our remit at this time.
So I can just comment on that briefly. We had several conversations when we first got going, because there were some surrounding counties, like Louisa, for instance, that tried this. Nelson tried it in a different sort of way. And we also, as Mike can fill in the details, is we also spoke with a company about what it would cost to do middle mile in southern Albemarle, a really great big loop. And as I remember, it came back as an estimate, and this was not a hard, detailed estimate, but we were thinking it was going to be 40 million. I'm thinking it was some crazy number. Yeah. And it was simply too much money for us to do as a government, giving all our other responsibilities, and we didn't want to go into business again. And there were also concerns about the state making things illegal for us as we moved along. We've really felt like there was a lot of ways that we could work with, with the private companies at this point, and it really looked like that was the direction that the state was going to support. So all in all, I guess I said brief, and I wasn't brief, but that was a decision by the Board of Supervisors. And so I would say Bucky is correct. We would want to go back to the Board of Supervisors to talk about that kind of investment.
And if I could add, and of course, I'm a new supervisor. I was not there when this conversation took place before. But having previously had a position as the Deputy Assistant Judge Advocate General of the Navy in charge of technology actions that the JAG Corps was undertaking, I experienced firsthand the expense and difficulty of a government entity that is not a principal, provider of that sort of technology service, competing against companies that are. So my sense is that I understand why the board would have decided why they did in not wanting the county to be a provider. I don't know that that actually answers Waldo's very excellent question, however, in terms of if there is already existing equipment, whether there might be an avenue that would open that up to kind of close the gap. And in that, I think I'm agreeing with Supervisor Palmer that this is something that would have to be thought through, worked up, and then presented to the board. The other thing would be that if it's something that is the school systems in the Albemarle County Public Schools, would also have to be a part of that conversation. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I guess going back to originally opening it up for questions, I will say that I only had time to briefly skim through the strategy plan, but and so I haven't read it in detail, but I very much appreciate the existence of such a thing, and I see the value, and I'm looking forward to sitting down and really reading through it with more detail.
Waldo, did you have any further major comments?
Yeah, two more. One is a relative sea change as well, I think, which is the one sentence goal of extending affordable broadband internet service access to every customer in Albemarle County. My question is whether we want to consider, in light of this being raised elsewhere in this document, if our goal should be to extend competitive affordable broadband. That the lack of competition in much of the market in Albemarle County is, of course, like a known problem in the world, lack of competition. And do we have a role to play here, or should we have a role to play here in creating competition where there is presently none?
That's a great question. The document speaks indirectly to the notion that competition creates a better environment, but it's not baked into the goal of the Broadband Authority. And
its omission seems deliberate, I assume.
We do define affordable in the context of local affordability, not affordable somewhere, but not any further than that. So I think that's an interesting question. Because
at the moment we follow the general practice of grant making organizations as well, which is, oh, that area is covered. Yeah, we're not going to do that. And I appreciate why, largely due to market captivity, as best I can tell, why particularly the FCC happens to take that approach. But I'm dubious that we need to take that approach. And in particular, I look at areas that CenturyLink ostensibly covers, just to pick a vendor because they cover most of our rural area, where we've had people come to us and say, I have CenturyLink service, but it's really slow. It gets slower all the time. They're not doing anything about it. Would we be willing to say, we will provide funding to get another provider in there because there's an ostensible provider there, but the service is inadequate? And of course, that would apply to any vendor, not just CenturyLink.
Of course, if the service is inadequate, then it's probably not meeting the definition for broadband. So it's going to fail at that point. If the service is just more than I want to pay, then that's where a second vendor creates an opportunity for you.
That's part of the affordable part. Yeah.
Yeah.
But at the moment, we seem to take off the table implicitly doing anything competitive, either as a matter of cost or in improving quality. And I wonder if this is a place to insert the word competitive.
I would offer that at this time, as long as we have people who are unserved with broadband, it's premature to look at competitive broadband for everyone until we're further down the path of getting more of our population with actual, acceptable level of service. Once we reach that point, then it's certainly time to go back and go, okay, where can we make it better for the folks who have a choice?
But the question I would ask is, where is that point? At what point do we declare, I don't want to say victory, but say we have achieved an adequate level of coverage for the county that we believe we can also, in addition to covering the people who are presently uncovered, which is what we talked about, will get increasingly difficult. Like, it only gets harder as we go. At what point do we say we're also going to spend our attentions on areas of the county that do have coverage, but it is inadequate for the people living there for whatever reason? That seems like a tough thing, an important thing for us to define at some point.
I'm pretty sure it's not at the point where we can still point at, at hundreds of folks on Green Creek Road who need service, and, big chunks of the county that are just without anything acceptable. But I can't say exactly where that is. I couldn't tell you it's at 96.1% coverage, then there we are.
You'll have to figure it out at some point, though. Seems like an important question.
The principle is sound. I don't have any quibble about the principle.
Yeah. I worry otherwise we become a broadband authority of diminishing returns. We do more and more work to serve fewer and fewer people. And that's great for those fewer people, but not great for the other folks.
I guess I agree with what Bucky has been saying. I agree with both of you, of course, but I'm just going through in my mind what that would look like and what that pathway would look like. Because, I have just reported my own speed test right before getting on here. And for the first time, I got over 9 for a download, which is just amazing at my location. And I had just read, and of course, I've never gotten more than 1. I've never gotten even 1 on an upload. So, I guess I'm wondering, really the only other choice is fiber. My assumption is it's, because the Wi-Fi around here is not getting there. So what would we really be doing that we're not doing now? I totally get where you're coming from. But at this stage of the game, what would we really be going after?
Another DSL provider.
I didn't know they were out there willing to even look at us.
I don't have any idea.
Trevor has a question in chat, so I'd like to recognize Trevor and have him make his comment.
Thanks,
or-
Mike. Just
Thank you.
trying to squeeze in a comment.
Yeah, it's great conversation. Yeah.
So it's really, it's under the, I guess, the context of affordability and just a general question that I think my awareness has been raised through this pandemic, and the work that the schools have done around access to technology. And there's certainly I'm going to ramble here for a minute. There's certainly the rural piece of no ability to connect, and so that broadband connection. But what surprised me, and something that we are looking at even through the CARES funding, which Mike will talk about a little bit in the new business, is there's a lot of people, a lot of families in our urban ring that theoretically could connect to have access, but they cannot afford it. And so one of the things that I noted is missing from our strategy document is the word equity. Maybe it's embedded there under affordability, but affordability can mean different things. And so, kind of a fresh set of eyes on this, and my eyes are even open more with, the past 105 days of the pandemic. Might we want to look at it from an equity perspective too, an equity lens, so maybe more than just the pipe of getting it, into the rural areas, but also how do we support it getting connected into the homes? I don't know. It's something that I'm struggling with, and I just think we maybe want to have some intentionality about that in our guiding documents.
Thank you.
Can I add one more thing? I was going to talk about this in new business, but it keeps coming up in this conversation, so I'm going to go with it right now. On Monday, I met with Chris Runyon, who is the 25th District General Assembly representative, and he's my representative in the General Assembly, and he's on the Communications Technology and Innovation Committee. And my meeting was about something totally different than broadband, but at the end of the meeting, I brought up our broadband authority. He asked a few very good questions that I decided to defer until I had talked to everybody here and probably gotten some ideas from Mike in writing. But he had been talking to the folks that in Greenwood that were on the other side of the tracks that didn't get the Comcast hookup. And one thing he asked me was, what about the VATI grants make it more difficult for you to apply? How could we make the structure of the VATI grant better? He also asked if our ordinances for the antenna or towers antenna more for the fixed wireless could be changed to make that easier to get in fixed wireless. And he also said, while I'm on this subject that doesn't necessarily pertain right now to this, he also said the horrible thing that not to expect any VATI money coming out of this year. He thought they were going to cut it out, which I had not heard and didn't. I'm hoping he's wrong. But the information about how can we make it easier for fixed wireless, if that's where we want to go, for competition or whatever, and also how can we improve, how can we work with this General Assembly to improve the VATI process I think might allow us to open things up to different ISPs or something. So I'm going to throw that out now. I was going to talk about it in new business.
I'll chime in, try to build on something Trevor had, and then try to address the tower comments.
Well, I'm sorry, I have to one more thing because it pertained directly to Trevor. Thank you for reminding me. And I also brought up people not being able to afford the computers, the hookup, the monthly cost, which we've talked about here at the Broadband Authority before, and the possibility of using the CARES Act money, et cetera, for that. And he really didn't seem like he had addressed that in his committee yet, but I did bring that up as a concern of how we would get the money for that. So now I'll shut up.
Actually, I'm going to build on what you said too. So maybe one of the things we want to look at isn't fiber to the home, but it's actually fiber in the home. Change that to be the focus. And that gets towards the equity issue, the ability to actually use it. So it's fiber in the home, not fiber to the home. So just, I had that thought. And then the tower issue, it rears its head, all the time. It's just an issue of putting that on the priority list for a text amendment and moving it forward.
When we created the goal, we had a fairly robust discussion about what does that mean and how do you measure these things and all that. And we chose the word access to make it clear that there was an opportunity for citizen to purchase broadband, but not a requirement either on us or on them to make that happen. The reason we did that was we didn't think anyone had chartered us to go out and hook up broadband to everyone in the county. That wasn't, I don't think that was in the Board of Supervisors' mind when we were created. Again, this is a noble goal. I have a neighbor who can't afford to hook up to broadband, and they've got small kids, and it would be a boon to them if they were. They're actually in a little bit of a pocket where the school's little device for getting wireless service doesn't work for them either. So I would love to see them have broadband. I think it would improve the quality of their life and probably improve the outcomes of the kids' lives ultimately. So seems like a good thing to me. But I think we need to go one step up the chain to bake that into our remit if that's who we're going to be. I feel that, Trevor. It speaks to me because I think that there are some serious inequities that have been demonstrated, not demonstrated, really brought to the forefront. I mean, everyone knew these were issues, but it's been so clear in the last 3 months and counting that it's hard to ignore.
Can I ask, Mike, when you talk to these fixed wireless folks, do they complain about not being able to get an antenna up to serve these small pockets like in Afton and Greenwood and whatnot?
I don't think they complain as much as they're concerned that we don't have the impetus to put up new tower sites. There's tower sites and there's approved tower sites all throughout the county. And I think most of the wireless and fixed wireless providers are aware of those. It's just the cost to construct without knowing how many people are going to buy into their service is somewhat a hindrance, as well as any new type construction. I think they see our process as somewhat arduous, is probably the right word. I'll defer to Bill. The two of us pretty much have a standard answer to the questions that come in that seem to be complaints. Most of them are more like questions about how can you make it easier for us? And the best question I have, or the best response I have, is we need to provide more funding. We need to do site acquisition work. We need to work with the private landowners and make sure that we have good land lease type of arrangements and can build infrastructure so that they have power to the site. And we work with the communities and make sure that when we construct a new tower, it's done appropriately and following all of our existing rules. So, essentially, sometimes we get the calls that we're not as easy to work with as other counties, but most of the time, I think it's just an understanding of the lack of density is prohibiting the fixed wireless providers from putting up additional sites. And then the classic thing is this time of year, especially, you have to put up more in Albemarle County because we have so many hills and valleys and large trees that block the wireless signals. And with that, I'll be quiet a little bit and maybe have Bill, if he has some comments, to either back me up or question what I just said. So Bill, if you have any comments, please add on.
Well, we've only talked to a few people. And once we explain what the process is, they don't really express that big a concern about the process. Mike's right. It's more about, will they come? That seems to be where their issue is. It's return. It's not the process. At least that's what they say to us.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting if you look back over our VADI applications, and we've had success. I mean, we have to keep letting everyone know, the citizenry especially know, that the Broadband Authority and the County of Albemarle has had success with the VADI program, and hopefully we'll continue to have the same type of success. The biggest change that could happen is that they reinstitute the 35 million that was added to it. Taking away the 16 million this year is a big hit, because there were over 40 applications and only 12 of them were offered funds. So last year was, a boon year, meaning there were a lot of applications submitted. And I'm getting to a point here, but we've only had one wireless service provider follow through with an application. We've only submitted, out of all of our applications, we've only submitted one that was a wireless one. We were close last year, but then the company pulled out at the last minute because they weren't able to put all their financial information together for us. So, there's intent, meaning, yes, we want to work with you if you know you're going to be able to provide the service. And in addition, we've made the commitment that we'll work with you to use publicly held property as a potential tower or tower sites. I mean, it's constant. AT&T, I send them tower sites. Verizon, I send them tower sites. We've got, we built a tower at Albemarle High School and things still aren't activated over there. So it's just I guess I would call it a struggle. We know it's a need. And from the public safety perspective, it's certainly a need. Lots of roads out there without coverage, and someone runs off the road and they can't dial 911. It seems to me that that's a concern that we as a county and the Broadband Authority should be trying to address. So I'll get off my soapbox a little bit and let everyone else talk.
Let me jump in here again and see if, let me go over a couple of things that I've heard. One, we had the, would we offer, middle mile services? Second, are we interested in competitive service offerings? I think we've spoken about the issue of equity and ensuring not only that we have, broadband available, broadband actually in the places where it can do the most good in the homes of our residents. And I'm not opposed at all to adding some sort of a piece to this strategy plan, which is the context in which we're having this useful conversation. It's a communication vehicle, so this is great. I'm not opposed at all to putting all of those things in the strategy plan as things we are thinking about. We are not committed to doing at this time, but we recognize that these are important issues that we'll take up as we move further down towards our strategic goals. Are there other things that either need to be in there now, or do some of those things need to be in there now? Should we be going back to the Board of Supervisors for their blessing to expand ourselves, or can we, I don't want to say take these things as tabled, can we put these things in the plan as things we're not forgetting, but we're not going to focus on right now?
Yeah, I just want, my concern is is that we don't preclude ourselves from these things by not including them in the document. And exactly as you say, that it's communicating intent.
Mm-hmm.
And communicating at least intent toward equity seems real important. Obviously, equity is more important than the intent to achieve equity, as is saying we intend to get broadband to everybody in this county. And if that requires doing something other than subsidizing private ISPs building out to each of their individual homes, we're willing to explore doing that. I think that's an important message to get across, exactly as you cite. I'm really just using too many words to agree with you here.
Any other thoughts on this?
If it pleased the board, I just want to point out, I think I hope I sent this around when I sent the document, the importance of this. Because of the VADI application process, we need to have a solid plan. The next step, and this is another great thing about the program in general, I know I keep gushing about how well, and they are, the state is very interested in equity. They're extremely interested in showing that we're addressing that issue in particular. But they need to see our plan, and they've been willing to review it prior to the application, prior to the application deadline, which is August 17th. So if we could get this all tightened up and ready to go a week before August 17th, so August 10th at the latest, DHCD has said they'll look at it and potentially give us feedback on what we could do to improve it and thus make our application more viable, or we'll gain more points during the scoring process. So that, I hope I made that clear. Maybe I should have been like Waldo. Please have it back to me by August 10th.
Thanks, Mike, for that further information. Let me propose this timeline to the board, or the Broadband Authority, and that is, I'll take the comments that I've heard here tonight and do my best to incorporate them in our strategy plan. I will issue a copy of that out to all of you within 7 days, and look for your comments back on that within 7 days from that. And hopefully by the time we get to the next meeting, we will have a document that seems to be something that we can vote on to approve. And at our July meeting, we'll have something that at that point in time, if it has been approved, we could send it then to DHCD for their review. Does that sound acceptable to everyone? Let me just run down the roll and make sure that we're getting everybody on board for this. Bill?
Yes.
Trevor?
Yes.
Donna?
Yes.
Waldo?
Yes.
Liz?
Yes.
And I'm not going to spoil it by voting no, so let's make it unanimous. Good.
I have one other question about this document.
Sure.
Should we reconsider the 10-1 floor?
As in taking it out of there entirely?
Well, no, as in that's a really low floor. And the argument for fixed connections, or for wireline connections, would be, look, even CenturyLink has moved on. They're going with fiber now. But I'm wary of precluding wireless providers, which I'm not a big fan of, but here we are where everybody's at home for like months to come, probably, because here we are. And I don't know what speeds are realistic to expect or to set as a floor for wireless providers. I would love for us, for wired connections, to be able to really up our standards from 10.1, but I'm wary that we're cutting ourselves off from, I don't want to let the perfect be the enemy of the good, but it seems like 10.1 is a really neat number that maybe we should reconsider. Anyway, I just want to raise that possibility. I have given inadequate thought to this. No, let me phrase it. I have inadequate knowledge around this. I've given a bunch of thought, but it's done me very little good without the knowledge of what to expect from wireless providers.
Well, our document specifies 25.3 as our broadband floor, and we will use 10.1 only when we're working with funding sources that are using that number for their floor.
But is there any reason why we can't?
I'm not going to turn away money that would fund a 10.1 connection, because that's not fast enough.
Well, the question is, do we want to spend the money on that, as opposed to we want to, we have a limited resource to spend in matching grants. And I guess my question is, do we want to match a 10.1 grant? Or do we want to say, no, that's particularly, I'm thinking of federal funding where they won't build that stuff for like 6 years. Imagine finally getting broadband in 2026 and it's a 10-1 connection. It's like
Sure.
a curse.
No, that's
So
a good comment.
I just think it's something we should think about.
Any comments on this? Because we can have just an up-down vote on it, and unless there are some comments.
The trouble is I have no alternative to propose. I'm sorry, Liz.
Yeah, I have been very leery of the fixed wireless because I don't know how fast you can get with fixed wireless. But I brought it up before because Chris Runyon, Representative Runyon, brought it up for that one place, and also actually because Waldo was talking about competition, and I'm not sure what competition is out there. And so, yeah, but I haven't heard of anybody with fixed wireless getting 25 down. I mean, most of those are way less than 10. So somebody else that knows more about it than I do could comment.
And if it's way less than 10, would we even want to fund that?
No,
That seems really grim.
We wouldn't. And that's another question about why I haven't really pursued the antenna situation as a priority, because I don't know what that's really going to get us. So anyway, yes, I agree with you. I would not want to fund something that's 10-1 that's going to take 6 years to put in if it's something that's kind of we talked about temporary towers at one time during the COVID issue. So I think it would have to be very clearly defined, the timeline, why we're doing it under very specific circumstances. And I don't see those coming forward. I mean, the request for proposals is going to be pretty interesting. Do we even hear from any fixed wireless companies?
Mm-hmm. That's a great point.
Let me just
those responses may be a way to take the temperature of what the possibilities even are. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Let me just run down the roll and say, do we want to be, let's make it in a positive sense. Do we want to look at, in general, 25.3 being the floor that we use? And I'll start with Bill.
It's a tricky one. 25.3 is a great answer, but if somebody comes along and says, "Hey, give me this much money and I can do 10-1 in 8 months," that might be perfectly acceptable. And so I don't know. I want to see what the proposal is. I'm not adverse to somebody saying I'll do 10-1 and I'll have it up and running in 8 months.
Waldo is shaking his head and making gestures. So
because I don't know either.
Yeah,
I don't have it. I'm with Bill. Like, I don't know. I don't have an answer here. It's a hard question.
Which you asked. Okay.
No, I know.
Trevor.
I ask questions when I don't know the answer.
I will admit I'm a little out of my depth on this from a technical perspective, but could we use preferred as a way that doesn't lock us into a mandate, that would allow us to maybe, there may be other factors that would kind of tip the scales to say, yeah, we would want to do it. Using the CARES Act funding as an example. Maybe it's not the speed exactly that we would want, but it's a project that could be executed and done within the 6 months that we have to do it. That might tip our scales to a way where we say, yeah, we want to do that.
Where I was going is sort of like, does it fill a critical need? So we need it now, okay? It's better than having nothing and waiting 4 years until you get 25.3.
Okay. So I guess if we don't have to have a hard floor, then I'm okay with that.
Let me keep going down the list. Donna?
I will admit to being completely out of my league on trying to answer that question and defer to those of you who have actual technical knowledge of some degree, which I have a complete absence. So I will pass on this.
Well, I've already called on you. And Liz?
Well, I think I've already answered it.
I think you have.
But yeah, I would agree with Bill. We just heard that Skylar, that and Schuyler's, a lot of Schuyler, a good portion of Schuyler is getting done with this VATI grant with CenturyLink. That's really great, but it's not all getting done with that. And we've got, what was it, 2022, that they think that that substation is going to be taken care of. So and we have some Appalachian Power in there. Some of them are Appalachian Power. And my understanding is that by the time we get there, Nelson might actually get to a couple of those houses on the edge there. So, you know, if somebody came by and said fixed wireless for this little area and I can get it up in 8 months, I'm going to be looking at the amount of money that we have to put in there and what those other options are for those folks, and deciding on that, you know, based on that, and with the rest of the Broadband Authority board. So I can't answer it either. I guess the answer is no for 25-3, you know? I think that's really is the answer.
What I will do is write some words to assemble all the comments I've heard here tonight and make it into something coherent and crystal clear. That's what I'm going to do.
Good luck.
I've got 7 days, no problem.
I really appreciated Liz's, I think it was Liz who made the point that let's see what the responses look like to this RFP. I mean, what a great landscape study of what the possibilities are. We have a 10-1 floor now. Let's see what gets proposed, and maybe that will be clarifying. It'd be great to revisit this in a couple.
But I like the suggestion of the prefers floor that doesn't lock us out of something else in special circumstances. So I think that's where I'll go. Are there any other comments, questions, et cetera, on the strategy plan, or will you sit tight until you get the next edition and then read it cover to cover and be happy?
I'll send you a bunch of little edits tonight, just small stuff.
Thank you very much. And anyone else who has any edits, please send them along. All righty, let's move along to new business. Meeting schedule discussion. Mike, is this you putting that on there?
Yes, it was mine, Chair. I just have to harken back to our prior meeting where I put up a slide, and unfortunately I don't have it tonight. I could share my screen, but I think it's important for us to, maybe I should share this so that you guys can see my notes. Bear with me here for a second and I'll share the particular notes that I have. Hold on just a second. So you should be seeing a Word document with new business.
Yes, we are.
Okay, so yeah, bad formatting here, but just so you know, the dates. So as we mentioned before, June 30 is the applications or no responses due. That doesn't mean we won't get responses prior to June 30, but that's the date. So one of the things that we talked about is that the scoring team is going to get together and score each of those proposals. That should be proposals, not applications, my apologies, but the proposals, and present a summary. We'll present a summary to the board of our scores. So it seems to me, and I didn't put our meeting in here either, our July meeting's not in here, but it seems to me we might have to have a meeting somewhere in this time frame. In fact, it's possible that it would be beneficial if sometime before the 13th we have a meeting that defines both what are we putting in as DHC intent of VATI application, pointing out that similar to the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, just because you submitted an intent to apply for VATI, it doesn't mean you have to follow through and actually submit the application. But if we have a lot of competition, meaning there's multiple ISPs, which we hope we have, we'll have to figure out which of those we'll put in. And that's another value, just going back to Waldo's statement. The RFP did a couple of things for us, but one of the most important was getting the word out that, hey, we're interested in partnering. And beyond that, we've gone a step further, and here are the project areas where we want to partner with you. Long story short, the reason I'm putting it up here is I'm making a recommendation that we pick a date somewhere after June 30 and before July 13th, just to touch base and have an open discussion to give primarily me direction on where I'm headed with both the notification of DHCD and just an update, a general update on the responses to our RFP. So let's start with that first slot, and maybe we don't need the meeting. Maybe it can all be done via individual discussions or chats, however we want to handle it. But I'll leave it up to you, Chair, to help me close the gap on June 30 to July 13th. Do people want to meet? That's the question.
I think it's a good idea.
We've got the 22nd blocked out here for our next regular meeting, but if we need to have an interim meeting, what would be the ideal time for that? What would you propose?
Wow, okay. No, there's a board meeting, well, that's the 15th, so that's when the report is due, also RDUF. So, sorry you're not seeing my calendar now.
How about July 8th, which is
July 8th is a Wednesday. Yeah.
It's the second Wednesday in between the regular scheduled board meetings.
Will
So
we have what we need to know?
That is an off Wednesday.
That is an off
I
Wednesday.
have no idea if it works for Diane, for Donna.
Well, I have a question about it. So let's say that we get 10 responses to the RFP. Could we not just say to DHCD, we intend to apply for all 10 of them and then hold a regular July meeting? Is there any danger of saying we're going to over-apply?
That's a great question, Bill. I think it's directed to me. I'm always concerned when and where I can speak up. I guess I'm at liberty to speak up. I think.
Whoever has the answer. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I want to make sure I'm following protocol. But yeah, I think that there's the only issue with that. Well, you're right. Why should I be concerned? Maybe I'm creating more concern here than it's necessary. Because my only issue was, let's say we're very fortunate and we have 4 ISPs in one way or another interested in partnering and including the same project area. So there's the potential that an ISP will come and say, we want to do 7 of the 15. Another ISP may come in and say, we want to do 3. And then compare and contrast, yes, we submit all of them. So I agree with you, Bill. Maybe you're right. Maybe this is just whatever we receive between now and July 13th from the ISPs. We don't necessarily have to have full ABBA board approval to put in for intent to apply. It's almost like
let me turn the question around a little bit. Instead of looking for a reason why we need to come back to the Broadband Authority to get approval to put in to DHCD, let me propose that we set this so that we're going to notify an intent to file on all of the choices,
right?
Unless something comes in that is just so outrageous that you would like the Broadband Authority to say it's okay not to do that one. And in which case, then we'll call a special meeting just to address that unforeseen situation.
I like that.
Agreed, by exception. And just one of the things that changed, and this was a submittal, a request. Originally, the intent to apply was supposed to include financials, meaning how much are you planning on providing as match. That was one of the concerns. That has since changed. Both CenturyLink, thanks Derek, and the Broadband Authority put in the recommendation to DHCD that they should remove that requirement, meaning for the intent to apply, you don't have to provide your financials. Originally, that was supposed to be included. Long story, but one of the great things that was removed from the preliminary guidelines in the final was the ease of putting in your intent to apply has been drastically improved. So I agree. So it's by exception. You know, we'll if things come back and we see something that we need to deny or whatever, we'll just try to schedule something on the fly by exception. And you know, Richie can correct
Mike.
me. Yes,
Mike,
sir.
Before we just march down that path, let me just do a quick roll call and make sure that the Broadband Authority is in agreement. Bill?
Yes.
Trevor?
Yes, sorry, I had a mouse problem. Thank you.
That's okay. I understand completely. Donna?
Yes.
Waldo?
Yes.
Liz?
Yes.
And I'm in favor as well. So that's what we're going to do. I think there's a question from Derek that might be of interest.
Yeah, I can answer if it pleases the board.
Go ahead, Mike.
Derek is asking a question if he's allowed to ask a question. I think yes, and I'll take that question. A no response is definitely encouraged, especially if we want to partner for a body. So we're interested in finding out, interest in both responding to the RFP as well as partnership with bodies. So a no response with an indication that our intent is to partner would be beneficial. I hope that that's fair to answer, and it's something that is in a similar type answer is in the frequently asked questions. So good question, Derek.
Yeah,
it's definitely our intent.
All right, so hopefully that addresses the scheduling question you had, Mike.
We can address the other ones. The next big thing will be as we go into negotiations, but let's take this one step at a time. So yes, sir, it has answered my question. Okay.
And then the last item on the agenda is the second quarter ABBA status report, which hopefully everyone has had a chance to review. It looked fine to me. Are there any other comments or suggestions for that?
Yes, I had one. I think it'd be good to put in there that this board has continued to meet through COVID using virtual meetings. That wasn't in there anywhere, that we've continued to do the work that the board asked us to do.
Okay.
Just a footnote, but I think it should be acknowledged that we're still here and we're still doing stuff even during COVID.
Thanks, Bill. I think that's a good point. Well taken.
Even if we don't all have the broadband solutions we would like to have.
That's our goal.
I mean, it's easy for me to be a little more thorough. Always adding thoroughness is a great thing. Just to indicate that, several of the virtual meetings, including this one, can be documented in the report. So
we've only canceled one meeting.
That's right. The March meeting is the only one that was canceled. So, April, May, and now June, we're all done virtually. So that's an excellent point. And we had attendees at each one. I mean, the May meeting was a significant amount of public input and attendance. So,
any other comments for Mike?
I think it looks good. Thank you, Mike.
Welcome. Yep.
And let me just run it quick down the list that we would approve this report as the amended suggestion has been made. Bill?
Yes.
Trevor?
Yes.
Donna?
Yes.
Waldo?
Yes.
Liz?
Yes.
And I'm in favor as well. Thank you very much, Mike.
Thank you. Thank you for the approval.
Is there any other business we should take up at this time?
I just want to mention one thing. We don't need to discuss it now, but I would like Mike or Bill or anybody else to, if they have any comments on how to make the VATI grant a better grant process or program, for me to communicate with Chris Runyon. I would appreciate that at some latter date. No rush. Thank you.
Will do. In writing, I have several ideas. So, so yes, thank you for that opportunity.
Anything else? Thank you all so much for your time, and I hope you can all stay safe.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Adjourning? Okay.
We're adjourned.
Are we, sir? Okay.
Bucky, he's gone.
Let me stop recording. No CARES Act, so okay, too late. Okay, we had some discussion, but All right, I'll pause.
So Mike, when Liz said that, I ran a quick speed test while I was here, and my wife was also doing a video streaming. Only had 50 down and 290 up.
50 down and 290 up.
Yeah, that was my speed
Okay, well,
with both of us doing stuff.
great.
Hey, Mike, I snuck a note in there at the very end. I don't know if you got it before.
Okay, great.
But, I approved the executive summary today with
Yeah.
the report.